I stood on that glittering stage at the Rosewood Country Club staring at my father as he handed my 8-year-old daughter a broken porcelain doll with half its face missing and a stained kitchen apron. The ballroom fell silent for exactly 3 seconds before erupting into laughter. My father leaned into the microphone, his voice carrying across the 200 guests in their black tie finest, and said with a smile that didn't reach his eyes, "Lily, I think you're better suited for cleaning up like your mother than running a business. Better start practicing now." The crystal chandeliers above us sparkled like 1,000 judgmental eyes. I watched my daughter's face crumble, watched the tears start to form in her gentle brown eyes, watched my sister Melissa immediately pull out her phone to live stream the moment to her 40,000 Instagram followers. The twins, Connor and Ethan, were already snickering from their seats, clutching the keys to their brand new ATVs and trust fund certificates worth $500,000 each. And I felt something inside me that had been bending for 32 years finally snap clean in half. If you're watching this and you've ever felt invisible in your own family, if you've ever given everything only to be treated like nothing, hit that like button, because this story is about to get wild. Subscribe if you want to hear how I went from doormat to destroyer. And comment below if you think revenge is a dish best served ice cold, because mine came with a side of FBI agents and bankruptcy papers. But let me back up and tell you how I got to that stage holding my sobbing daughter's hand, while 300 of the most influential people in Connecticut watched my family humiliate us on New Year's Eve. My name is Sarah Rogers, and for 32 years I believed that love meant sacrifice. I believed that being a good daughter meant swallowing your pride, your dreams, and sometimes your dignity. I believed that if I just worked hard enough, achieved enough, proved my worth enough, my parents would finally see me. I was wrong. I grew up in a house that looked like it belonged in Architectural Digest, but felt like a museum where the exhibits were constantly being judged and found lacking. My father, Richard Rogers, built a commercial real estate empire from the ground up, and he never let anyone forget it. My mother, Patricia, came from old money, the kind that whispers instead of shouts, and she wielded her social connections like weapons. Together they created a home where appearances were everything, and authenticity was a weakness. My older sister, Melissa, learned early to play their game. She became the perfect Instagram influencer before Instagram even existed, all blonde highlights and tennis whites and carefully curated victimhood. Every problem in her life was someone else's fault, and our parents ate it up. She married Eric, a decent guy from another wealthy family, and immediately produced the golden children. Connor and Ethan, born 11 months apart and treated like twins, became the centre of my parents' universe. I was the middle child, the one who didn't quite fit the mould. I wasn't interested in tennis or cotillions or spending my afternoons at the country club. I liked math and systems and figuring out how things worked. By the time I was 16, I was helping my father untangle his company's chaotic bookkeeping. By 20, I was running his operations from behind the scenes while he took credit in the boardroom. By 25, I had an MBA from Wharton and was the unacknowledged chief operating officer of Rogers Commercial Properties, pulling down an 80-hour work week for a salary half of what I was worth. And then I had Lily. Her father was a mistake I made at 23, a passionate 6-month relationship that burned out fast. He wanted nothing to do with fatherhood, signed away his rights, and disappeared to Seattle. I thought my parents would be disappointed, but they surprised me. They were thrilled. Finally, they said I could give them a grandchild they could actually mould properly. Except Lily wasn't what they wanted. She was sensitive where they demanded tough. She was creative where they valued athletic. She loved to draw and read and spend quiet afternoons in her room creating elaborate stories with her toys. She cried easily, felt deeply, and had absolutely no interest in the competitive sports and aggressive socialization that my parents considered essential for success. By the time she was 5, they had started their campaign of subtle erosion, little comments about how she needed to toughen up. Comparisons to Connor and Ethan, who were loud and confident, and exactly the kind of American golden children my parents could show off. They enrolled her in tennis lessons. She hated soccer camps, where she spent more time on the bench than playing, and constantly pushed her to be someone she fundamentally wasn't. I tried to protect her. God, I tried, but I was drowning in my own prison. Every time I pushed back, my father would threaten my job. Every time I set a boundary, my mother would weaponize the extended family against me. And Melissa, sensing weakness like a shark smells blood, would manufacture some crisis that required my immediate attention and free labor. The pattern was exhausting. My father would promise me equity in the company, then conveniently forget. Melissa would beg me to watch her boys for the weekend, then extend it to a week, then forget, to compensate me while she vacationed in the Hamptons. My mother would guilt me into organising charity galas that enhanced the family reputation, consuming hundreds of hours of my time while she took the credit and the accolades. And I kept thinking that if I just worked harder, sacrificed more, proved myself more thoroughly, they would finally respect me. They would finally love me the way I loved them. They would finally see that Lily was perfect exactly as she was. 3 months before that New Year's Eve, I had pulled off what should have been my crowning achievement. I had spent 18 months cultivating a relationship with Cornerstone Development, one of the biggest commercial property developers in the Northeast. They were notoriously difficult to work with, had a reputation for chewing up and spitting out partners, and had never worked with a firm as small as ours. I worked 80-hour weeks for 6 months straight. I missed Lily's school performances and parent-teacher conferences. I ate dinner at my desk more often than at home. I learned everything about their business model, their pain points, their expansion goals. I customized a proposal that would save them millions in operational costs while opening up 3 new markets for our firm. And I closed the deal. It was worth $40 million over 5 years. It would double our company's revenue. It would establish Rogers Commercial Properties as a major player instead of a regional boutique firm. My father presented the deal to our board of directors without mentioning my name once. He accepted their congratulations, their praise for his vision and business acumen, and gave himself a $200,000 bonus. He gave me a fruit basket and a card that said, "Thanks for your support." I should have left then. I should have walked away. But I told myself I was thinking of Lily. Where would we go? How would I support us? My father controlled everything, including the professional relationships I had built. And some sick part of me still believed that if I could just prove myself one more time, things would change. Then came the lead up to New Year's Eve. My parents decided to throw an extravagant gala at the Rosewood Country Club, ostensibly to celebrate the company's record year, but really to show off to everyone who mattered in Connecticut's business and social elite. They wanted it to be perfect, which meant they wanted me to plan it. 3 weeks before Christmas, my mother handed me a binder 3 inches thick with her requirements. Ice sculptures, a 12-piece orchestra, a 7-course dinner prepared by a celebrity chef, custom designed, invitations on handmade paper, and a guest list of 300 people. I had 3 weeks, while also closing out year-end financials for the company and trying to give Lily at least a semblance of a normal Christmas. I made it happen because that's what I always did. I called in every favour, worked every connection, and put together an event that would be talked about for years. The ballroom at Rosewood looked like something out of a fairy tale, all gold and crystal and winter-white roses. The food was impeccable, the music was perfect. And my mother swept through accepting compliments without mentioning that her daughter had arranged every detail. But here's the thing that kept me going through those brutal weeks. My father had mentioned casually that he wanted to do something special for all his grandchildren at the gala. He wanted to publicly present them with gifts that would symbolise their place in the family legacy. And he specifically mentioned Lily by name. I let myself hope. I let myself believe that maybe finally he was going to acknowledge her. That maybe this would be the moment when my family chose to see my daughter for the amazing little person she was. That maybe all my years of sacrifice were about to pay off. Christmas came and went in a blur. Melissa spent it at our parents' house with her boys who tore through their mountain of presents like locusts. Lily and I spent it quietly in our townhouse baking cookies and watching movies. She gave me a drawing she had made a picture of the 2 of us holding hands under a rainbow. I hung it on my refrigerator and cried in the bathroom after she went to bed. Then came New Year's Eve. I spent the entire day at Rosewood doing final checks, making sure every detail was perfect. Lily stayed with me, content to sit in a corner with her sketchbook. She was wearing the dress I had bought her for the occasion, a soft blue velvet that brought out her eyes. I had braided her hair with tiny white flowers woven through it. She looked like a princess from one of her storybooks. The guests started arriving at 7. Politicians and CEOs and old money families who had been fixtures of Connecticut society for generations. My father held court like a king, my mother beside him, in a designer gown that cost more than I made in 6 months. Melissa arrived fashionably late, Connor and Ethan already hyped up on sugar and running wild through the crowd. I had positioned myself near the kitchen, troubleshooting last-minute issues when my mother found me. She looked me up and down with that expression I knew so well, the one that said I was somehow failing to meet an unspoken standard. I was wearing a simple black dress, elegant but understated. I had thought it was appropriate. "You look like the help," she said. "Couldn't you have made an effort? This is an important night for the family." I bit back the response that I had been making an effort for 3 weeks straight to create this perfect night for her. Instead, I smiled and said, "I'll try to stay out of the photos." She patted my arm with that condescending touch that felt like a pat on the head to a dog. "That's probably for the best, dear. You know how you photograph." Dinner was served at 8. I barely tasted my food, too busy watching the staff to make sure everything went smoothly. Lily sat beside me picking at her salmon, and I could see her watching the twins who were making a game of throwing bread rolls at each other, while Melissa ignored them in favour of taking selfies. At 9:30, my father stood up and tapped his champagne glass for attention. The room fell silent. This was the moment everyone had been waiting for. Richard Rogers' self-made millionaire was about to hold court. He gave a speech about family and legacy and the importance of passing down values to the next generation. He talked about building something that would outlast him, about the responsibility of wealth, about preparing the next generation for leadership. People nodded along, impressed by his wisdom and foresight. Then he announced it was time for the gift presentation. A staff member wheeled out a table with 3 wrapped boxes. My heart started beating faster. 3 boxes, 3 grandchildren. Maybe this was real. My father started with Connor. He made a big show of it, talking about how Connor was showing such promise in lacrosse, how he had the competitive spirit and aggressive drive that would serve him well in business. He handed Connor a set of keys and explained that waiting in the garage was a brand new ATV. The crowd applauded. Connor pumped his fist in the air like he had just won a championship. Then Ethan. More praise, this time about his natural leadership skills and his popularity at school. Another set of ATV keys. More applause. Both boys also received leather portfolios. Inside, my father explained, were certificates for trust funds worth $500,000 each to be distributed when they turned 21. Investments in their future, he said. His voice swelled with pride. Melissa was crying happy tears, hugging our mother. The twins were already arguing about whose ATV was going to be faster. Then my father's eyes landed on Lily. "And of course," he said, his voice carrying that particular tone that I should have recognised as a warning, "we can't forget our little Lily." Lily looked up at me, her eyes wide and hopeful. I squeezed her hand. "It's okay," I mouthed. "He's going to give you something special." My father gestured and someone brought forward a box. It wasn't wrapped like the others. It was just a plain cardboard box, the kind you might use for storage. Something cold started forming in my stomach. He called Lily up to the stage. She walked slowly, nervously, and I followed close behind her. The spotlight was bright and hot. 300 faces watched us with varying degrees of interest and champagne-enhanced warmth. My father handed Lily the box. She opened it carefully, always so careful with everything. Inside was the broken doll and the apron. I saw the confusion cross her face. She looked up at him, waiting for the explanation that would make it make sense. That's when he leaned into the microphone and delivered his verdict on my daughter's worth. The laughter started immediately. It wasn't cruel laughter exactly, more the uncomfortable titter of people who didn't know how else to react to an awkward moment. But it built. Someone in the back let out a genuine guffaw. I heard Melissa's distinctive cackle, and I watched my daughter's face as she realised that this wasn't a mistake or a joke that she didn't understand. This was intentional. Her hands started shaking. The broken doll fell out of the box and shattered further on the stage. The apron fell at her feet. And my beautiful, sensitive, artistic daughter started to cry in front of 300 people while my sister filmed it for social media. Something happened to me in that moment. It was like every instance of swallowed pride, every bitten tongue, every justified anger I had suppressed for 32 years came rushing up all at once. My vision tunneled, my hands steadied, and I felt a clarity I had never experienced before. I stepped forward and took the microphone right out of my father's hand. He was so surprised he just let me. The room quieted, probably expecting me to smooth things over to make a joke to explain that this was all some kind of misunderstanding. That's what I always did. That's who they expected me to be. Instead, I looked out at all those faces. Politicians I had helped my father court. Business partners whose deals I had structured. Social climbers who had benefited from parties I had organised. All the people who had watched me be diminished and dismissed for years without saying a word. "Thank you, Dad," I said, and my voice was perfectly steady. "Thank you for this incredibly clarifying moment. Thank you for showing me and showing everyone here tonight exactly who you are and what you value. Thank you for making it crystal clear where I stand in this family." My father reached for the microphone. I stepped back. "You know what I've spent 12 years running your company. I closed the cornerstone deal that saved your legacy. I planned this entire event that you're using to show off. And you just handed my daughter garbage in front of everyone who matters in this state and told her she's only good for cleaning up messes." The room was dead silent now. Phones were out. People were recording. This was about to be the gossip of the century. "So here's what's going to happen. I quit, effective immediately. And since I'm betting none of you actually read the contract I signed when I took the COO position, here's a fun fact. I own the intellectual property rights to the entire client management system that runs this company. All the contacts, all the relationships, all the processes I built, they're mine. And I'm taking them with me." I bent down, picked up the stained apron and threw it directly at Melissa, who was still holding her phone up. It hit her in the face, knocking the phone from her hand. The satisfying crack of expensive smartphone hitting marble was the best sound I had heard all night. Then I took Lily's hand. Her small fingers wrapped around mine, sticky with tears and trust. And I walked off that stage through the silent crowd, past the ice sculptures and the celebrity chef's cuisine, and the 12-piece orchestra out the doors of the Rosewood Country Club and into the cold January night. We sat in my car for 10 minutes before I could turn the key. Lily was still crying quiet sobs that shook her small shoulders. I held her and let her cry and felt the full weight of what I had just done crash over me. I had just nuked my entire life. My job, my family, my financial security, my professional reputation, everything I had built for 32 years, gone in one microphone moment. And I felt free. We drove home in silence. I tucked Lily into bed, and she asked me the question I had been dreading. "Mummy, why don't they love me?" I sat on the edge of her bed and I told her the truth. "Baby, it's not about you. There is nothing wrong with you. You are creative and kind and sensitive and exactly who you're supposed to be. They don't love you because they don't know how to love anything that isn't a reflection of themselves. And that's their failure, not yours." She fell asleep holding her favourite stuffed rabbit. I went to my room and I sat on my bed and I waited for the panic to hit. Waited for the regret. Waited for the voice in my head that always told me I had gone too far, pushed too hard, been too much. It didn't come. Instead, I felt a strange sense of calm, and I knew what I had to do next. I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I pulled out my laptop and I started making lists. I listed every client relationship I had built, every contact I had cultivated, every process I had developed. I listed my skills, my experience, my track record. And I started to see something I had never seen before. I saw my actual value unfiltered by my father's dismissal and my family's diminishment. I had been a chief operating officer in everything but title for 8 years. I had built relationships with some of the most important players in commercial real estate across the Northeast. I had a proven track record of deal-making and operational excellence. I had closed a $40 million contract just months ago. I wasn't just valuable, I was exceptional. At 6 a.m. on January 1st, I sent 3 emails. The first was to my father with my mother and the company's board of directors copied. It was my formal resignation, effective immediately, along with documentation of my intellectual property ownership. I attached copies of my employment contract with the relevant clauses highlighted and a very polite note that I would be happy to negotiate licensing terms for my systems and processes. The second email went to 7 people. 5 were former employees of Rogers Commercial Properties who had been fired or pushed out over the years. People who I knew were talented and had been casualties of my father's ego or my mother's politics. 2 were professionals I had worked with on deals who had mentioned they were looking for new opportunities. The email was simple. I was starting something new and I wanted to talk to them about joining me. The third email went to someone I had sworn I would never contact, Julian Chen. He was a venture capitalist with a reputation for being ruthless but fair. He had made his fortune in tech, then moved into real estate investment. And 15 years ago, he and my father had been partners on a deal that went spectacularly bad. My father had blamed Julian publicly and destroyed his reputation in Connecticut business circles. Julian had spent years rebuilding his name and had never forgiven the betrayal. I knew Julian. I had met him several times at industry events, and I knew something my father didn't. Julian was aware that I had been the actual architect of most of Rogers Commercial Properties' success. He had tried to recruit me twice over the years. I had turned him down out of misplaced loyalty. My email to him was brief. I was leaving my father's company. I had taken my intellectual property with me. I wanted to build something new. Was he interested in discussing investment opportunities? He responded in 20 minutes, yes. The next 3 days were a blur. My phone rang constantly. My father, my mother, Melissa, all leaving voicemails that started out angry and demanding and slowly shifted to panicked and pleading as they realised what my departure meant. I didn't answer. I sent everything to my lawyer, a woman I had been smart enough to retain years ago when I first started feeling uneasy about my employment situation. On January 3rd, I met with Julian at a coffee shop in Hartford, deliberately chosen because it was nowhere near my father's usual haunts. He walked in looking exactly as I remembered. Sharp suit, sharper eyes, and the kind of focused intensity that made you understand how he had built a fortune. We didn't waste time on pleasantries. I laid out my vision. A commercial property management company that focused on mid-sized clients, the ones who were too big for boutique firms but too small to interest the major players. I had the relationships, the expertise, and the systems. I had 3 signed letters of intent from former clients who were eager to work with me instead of my father. What I needed was capital and a partner who understood the market. Julian listened without interrupting. When I finished, he leaned back and smiled. I've been waiting 15 years to destroy your father's company, but this is better. We're not going to destroy it, we're going to make it irrelevant. He offered terms that were more generous than I had expected. 60% equity for me, 40% for him. He would provide $2 million in seed funding and his extensive network of contacts. He wanted a board seat and quarterly reviews, but operational control was mine. We shook hands over coffee that cost $4, and I walked out as CEO. I named the company Phoenix Inc. because we were rising from ashes, and because I knew it would piss off my father when he heard about it. The next 2 weeks were intense. I leased office space in a building that happened to overlook Rogers Commercial Properties. I spent 12-hour days setting up systems, making calls and having meetings. 3 of the people I had emailed joined me immediately. 2 more needed time but were interested. I hired the 5 former Rogers employees who I knew had been unjustly treated. Every single one of them said yes. By the end of January, I had a team of 8, a functioning office, and 3 clients who had officially moved their business from my father's company to mine. It wasn't much, but it was mine, and it was clean. Lily thrived in those weeks. With my father's company off my plate, I had time, real time. I picked her up from school every day. We had dinner together every night. I enrolled her in an art class she had been begging for, instead of the tennis lessons she hated. I watched her start to uncurl like a flower that had been kept in the shade, finally getting sunlight. But I should have known my family wouldn't go quietly. The lawsuit came first. My father sued me for theft of trade secrets, breach of contract, and about 6 other things his lawyers could think of. It was a joke legally, but a nightmare practically. Defending against it would cost money I didn't have to spare and create exactly the kind of uncertainty that scared away potential clients. I had been prepared for this. My lawyer filed a countersuit within 48 hours. Turns out I had been keeping detailed records for years. Records of unpaid overtime, records of sexual harassment from business partners that my father had ignored, records of accounting irregularities that skirted very close to fraud, and the crown jewel documentation of a charity scheme where my father had been funneling donations through a fake foundation to reduce his tax burden. Tax fraud is not a charge the IRS takes lightly. My father's lawyers got very quiet very quickly. We ended up in mediation, which is a fancy way of saying we sat in different rooms while lawyers ran back and forth trying to find a settlement. My demands were simple: drop the lawsuit, acknowledge my intellectual property rights, and never contact me or Lily again. His counter was predictable. Come back to the company, we'll forget this ever happened, and he'd even create a real COO title for me. I laughed so hard the mediator looked concerned. We settled with my terms. My father's company paid me a licensing fee for the systems I had built enough to keep Phoenix Inc. running for 6 months. They dropped all legal action. And they agreed to a restraining order that kept them away from Lily and me. I should have felt triumphant. Instead, I felt tired. This was my father, my mother, my sister, the people who were supposed to love me unconditionally. And we were negotiating through lawyers like warring corporations. But I didn't have time to wallow, because in February, Melissa reminded me why I had been right to cut them off. I got a call at 2 a.m. It was from a number I didn't recognise. When I answered, groggy and confused, I heard an official voice asking if I was Sarah Rogers, mother of Lily Rogers. My heart stopped. Had something happened to Lily? She was asleep in her room. I had checked on her before bed. The voice explained that they were from Child Protective Services. They had received a report that Lily was being neglected, that our home was unsafe, that I was financially unstable and possibly using drugs. They needed to come inspect our home immediately. I stood in my kitchen at 2 a.m. in my pyjamas, while a social worker and a police officer walked through my townhouse looking for signs of abuse or neglect. They interviewed Lily, who was terrified and crying. They looked in my medicine cabinet, my refrigerator, my bank statements. They treated me like a criminal while my daughter sobbed in her room. The inspection took 3 hours. They found nothing because there was nothing to find. Our home was clean and safe. Lily was healthy and well cared for. I was gainfully employed and sober. The social worker apologised, said the complaint had been very detailed and concerning, and left me with a case number and a warning that the investigation would remain open for 30 days. I knew immediately who had made the call. There was only one person vindictive enough, only one person who would have access to enough details about my life to make a credible false report. My sister Melissa, who had spent her entire adult life playing the victim and punishing anyone who called her on it. I called my lawyer at 7 a.m. By 9, I had filed a lawsuit for false reporting and harassment. By noon, I had subpoenaed Melissa's phone records, the legal equivalent of a declaration of war. But I got something I hadn't expected. That afternoon, I received a call from Eric, Melissa's husband. He asked if we could meet. His voice sounded strained, almost desperate. We met at a park halfway between our homes. Eric looked terrible. He had always been a pleasant guy, attractive in that generic way of men who grew up with trust funds and good orthodontia. But now he looked gaunt with dark circles under his eyes. He didn't waste time. "I know what Melissa did," he said. "I heard her making the call. I tried to stop her, but she locked herself in the bathroom and did it anyway." I waited. There was more coming. "Sarah, I need your help. I want a divorce. I've wanted one for 3 years, but I've been afraid. Afraid of what she'd do to me, afraid of what your parents would do, afraid I'd lose the boys. But watching what she did to you and Lily, I can't anymore. I just can't." He pulled out a folder. Inside were bank statements showing that Melissa had been systematically draining their joint accounts to fund her shopping addiction. Credit card bills in the hundreds of thousands. Evidence of affairs with 2 different men. Screenshots of messages where she discussed ways to hide money from him. "I've been documenting everything for 2 years," he said. "But I need a good lawyer. I need someone who understands how vicious she can be. I need your lawyer." I looked at this man, this decent person who had been trapped in a marriage with my sister, and I made a decision. I gave him my lawyer's number, and I told him I would testify on his behalf if he needed it. Eric filed for divorce a week later. Melissa lost her mind. She called me screaming, accusing me of destroying her family. She called our parents, who immediately rallied around her because of course they did. She posted on social media about betrayal and family loyalty, carefully leaving out the affairs and the embezzlement and the false CPS report. But here's the thing about social media: the internet never forgets. And once Eric's lawyer released the court filings, which included all that beautiful documentation, public opinion turned fast. Melissa went from sympathetic wife to exposed fraud overnight. Her Instagram followers started leaving in droves. Brands that had partnered with her dropped their contracts. The country club gossip mill that had sustained her entire identity turned on her like sharks smelling blood. I wish I could say I felt bad. I didn't. I felt satisfied in a way that probably makes me a terrible person. She had tried to have my daughter taken away from me. She had weaponized the system designed to protect children because I had dared to stand up to our parents. She deserved everything she got. March came, and with it an opportunity that would change everything. Julian called me with news about a government contract. The Department of Veterans Affairs was putting out a request for proposals to manage a portfolio of properties across 5 states. It was worth $50 million over 3 years. It was the kind of contract that would establish a firm as a major player. And both Rogers Commercial Properties and Phoenix Inc. had made the shortlist for the final presentation. I knew my father would pull every string he had to win that contract. It wasn't just about the money. It was about proving that he didn't need me, that his company was still viable, that Sarah's little rebellion hadn't damaged his empire. The presentation was scheduled for March 15th. 4 firms would present to a panel of government officials and independent evaluators. We would have 90 minutes to make our case. I spent 2 weeks preparing. My team worked around the clock, building the perfect proposal. We structured it to emphasize flexibility and personalized service, the things that smaller firms could offer that major corporations couldn't. We highlighted our track record, our client satisfaction rates, our innovative approaches. It was the best work I had ever done. 3 days before this presentation, my office was broken into. Someone had accessed my computer and copied my VA presentation. Most people would have panicked. I created a fake presentation instead, left it on my computer in a folder labelled VA Presentation Final, and took my real one home. The night before the big day, they came back. This time my security cameras caught everything. I let them steal the fake proposal. I wanted my father to think he had already won. March 15th arrived cold and clear at the Hartford Convention Centre. Rogers Commercial Properties presented first. My father was confident and polished, presenting my fake proposal word for word. The panel looked interested, but not impressed. It was designed to be just good enough to seem real, but not good enough to win. Then it was my turn. My father sat 3 rows back, smiling like a man who knew how this would end. I presented for 80 minutes, and it was the best work I had ever done. Case studies, technology integrations, veteran testimonials. But the real magic was in the financials. I showed how we could save the VA 12% in costs while improving service. I had numbers, projections, independent audits for everything. As I packed up to leave, the main screen suddenly lit up again. Split screen. My fake proposal on the left, my father's presentation on the right. Identical. Then bright red text appeared. This data was stolen from Phoenix Inc. on March 14th at 11:47 p.m. Corporate espionage is a federal crime. The room erupted. My father jumped to his feet, face red. Then the doors opened and 3 people walked in. 2 FBI agents and an IRS criminal investigations representative. They walked straight to my father. I had filed reports about the break-in and the stolen data. But I had also finally submitted all that documentation about his tax fraud. The fake charity unreported income shell companies. Everything handed to the authorities with security footage as proof. My mother went pale, Melissa stopped filming, and I walked out with my head high. We won the contract 3 days later. Phoenix Inc. was awarded the $50 million deal. The FBI investigation took 6 months. My father was charged with tax fraud and corporate espionage. My mother was named as a co-conspirator. They both faced prison time. Then their lawyer called. My parents wanted a deal. They would plead guilty to reduce charges if I agreed not to pursue civil action and help with legal fees. The audacity was almost impressive. I agreed to meet once. They had aged a decade in months. My father's swagger was gone. My mother's composure had cracked. They sat across from me and begged, playing every card. Family loyalty, forgiveness, maintaining appearances. My father even cried real tears. I listened to all of it. Then I pulled out an envelope. Phoenix Inc. will purchase the Rogers Commercial Properties brand for $1. In exchange, I won't pursue further civil action, and I'll agree to a plea deal that keeps you out of prison. But you will agree to a permanent restraining order against me and Lily. No contact ever. You'll sign over any claims to her guardianship. Violate this once, and you spend the rest of your lives in prison. My mother gasped. You can't ask us to give up our granddaughter. She was never your granddaughter, I said calmly. She was a toy you broke and then blamed for being broken. And I'm not asking, I'm telling. Take the deal or face the full consequences of your actions. They took the deal. Of course they took the deal. The legal proceedings dragged on for months. My father and mother both received suspended sentences, massive fines and probation. They lost their house when the bank foreclosed. They lost their place at the country club when they couldn't afford the dues. They lost their friends when scandal made them social pariahs. Rogers Commercial Properties officially ceased to exist when I bought the name. I retired the brand. It deserved to die. Melissa's divorce was finalised in August. Eric got primary custody of the boys and most of the assets. Melissa got a wake-up call about consequences and a court-ordered therapist. The last I heard, she had moved to Florida and gotten a job in retail management. No more Instagram influencing. No more country club lunches. Just regular life, which for Melissa was probably the harshest punishment imaginable. That brings us to now. It's December, again, almost a year since that New Year's Eve gala. I'm sitting in my office on the top floor of a building in downtown Hartford. Phoenix Inc. now has 40 employees. We're managing over $100 million in property across 6 states. We just closed another major government contract. Julian and I are already discussing expansion plans. On my desk in a place of honour is that broken porcelain doll. I had it professionally mounted in a glass case with a small brass plaque that reads "Never Bow." It's my reminder, not of where I came from, but of where I decided to go. Lily is thriving. She's 9 now, taller, more confident. She's in advanced art classes and her work has been featured in 2 local gallery shows. She has real friends, kids who appreciate her creativity instead of mocking her sensitivity. Last week she performed in her first theatre production and she wasn't afraid to be on stage. The twins Connor and Ethan come to visit sometimes. Eric brings them by and we all have dinner. Without Melissa's influence and my parents' toxic reinforcement, they're actually turning into decent kids. They apologised to Lily for how they treated her. It was awkward but sincere. We're building something new there. Not the family I was born into, but maybe the family we all deserve to have. A few weeks ago, Lily asked me if I ever missed her grandparents. It was late at night, one of those conversations that happen in the dark when kids feel safe enough to ask the hard questions. I thought about it carefully before answering. I miss the idea of them, I told her. I miss having parents who loved me the way I deserved, but the actual people know I don't miss being treated like I don't matter. Do you think they miss us? She asked. Probably, I said, but not because they love us, because they lost control of us, and that's not the same thing. She was quiet for a minute, then she said something that broke my heart and healed it at the same time. I'm glad you threw that apron at Aunt Melissa. She deserved it. I laughed and she laughed and we were okay. I'm not going to pretend this year has been easy. There were nights I cried myself to sleep wondering if I had made the right choice. There were moments of crushing loneliness when I realised I had no parents to call, no family to lean on. There were times when the weight of running a company while raising a child alone felt impossible. But here's what I learned. Family isn't who you're born to. Family is who shows up. Julian, who invested in me when no one else would. My team, who took a risk on a new company led by someone with a complicated past. Eric, who chose to protect his kids over maintaining toxic loyalty. My lawyer, who fought for me like I mattered. The therapist Lily and I both see who helped us heal from trauma we didn't even realise we were carrying. That's family, that's love, that's what matters. Sometimes people ask me if I have any regrets. If I wish I had handled things differently, been less dramatic, tried harder to maintain the relationship with my parents. The answer is no, not even a little bit. Because here's the truth that no one wants to say out loud. Some relationships are toxic, some people will never change. Some families are better loved from a distance or not at all. And choosing yourself, choosing your child, choosing peace over performance, that's not selfish, that's survival. I spent 32 years trying to earn love that was never going to be given freely. I sacrificed my dignity, my time, my worth, all for people who saw me as a tool to be used. And the moment I stood up for myself, for my daughter, for basic human decency, they revealed exactly who they always were. The broken trophy was never about the gift. It was about making my daughter small enough to fit into their worldview. It was about reminding me that no matter what I achieved, I would always be less than in their eyes. But they made a mistake. They thought breaking us would make us weaker. Instead, it made us realise we were never broken at all. We were just trapped. So no, I don't regret walking away. I don't regret the lawsuits or the FBI report or buying their company for $1 just to shut it down. I don't regret any of it. Because now when Lily draws pictures, she draws us in a house full of rainbows. She draws herself, standing tall, no longer hunched over, trying to be invisible. She draws a future where she's an artist or a writer or whatever she wants to be, not what someone else demands. And when I look at my life now, I see something I never had before. I see my own empire built on my terms. I see success that no one can take credit for, except me. I see a daughter who knows her worth because I finally learned mine. I see freedom. The cost was everything. The gain was myself. Was it worth it every single painful, liberating, terrifying minute? Here's what I want you to understand if you're in a similar situation. If you're the one who always sacrifices, if you're the one who always bends, if you're the one who keeps thinking that if you just try harder, give more, prove yourself better, they'll finally see you. They won't. They never will. Because the problem isn't you. It never was. You are not too sensitive. You're not too demanding. You're not ungrateful or selfish or any of the things they've called you to keep you in line. You are a person who deserves love without conditions, respect without having to earn it, dignity as a baseline. And if the people in your life can't give you that, if they make you smaller to make themselves bigger, if they use guilt and obligation as weapons, then they're not your people. They're your prison. Walking away is terrifying, I know. I did it with no safety net, with a child, depending on me, with my entire professional and personal life on the line. There were moments I thought I had made the worst mistake of my life. But I didn't. I made the best decision I ever made, and you can too. It won't be easy. There will be people who judge you, who say you should have tried harder, who insist that family is everything, and you're abandoning your responsibilities. Let them judge. They're not the ones living your life. They're not the ones paying the price for maintaining toxic relationships. They're not the ones watching their children learn that love means accepting abuse. You deserve better. Your children deserve better. And sometimes the most loving thing you can do is walk away. So if you're standing at your own New Year's Eve moment, holding your own broken trophy, wondering if you're strong enough to leave, let me tell you something. You are. You've always been strong enough. You've been strong enough to survive them this long. You're definitely strong enough to survive without them. And on the other side of that fear, there's a life waiting for you. A life where you're not constantly braced for the next dismissal. A life where your achievements are yours. A life where your children learn that self-respect isn't negotiable. I'm living that life now, and I promise you it's worth every hard moment it takes to get here. The broken trophy sits on my desk, a reminder not of what they tried to make me, but of what I refused to become. Every day I look at it and remember that moment on the stage. The moment I chose myself. The moment I chose Lily. The moment I stopped accepting crumbs and started demanding the whole damn table. That's the moment everything changed, not because they changed, because I did. And that's the only change that ever really mattered. So here's my question for you, and I want you to really think about it. What's your broken trophy? What's the moment that could change everything if you're brave enough to let it? What are you still accepting that you know in your heart you deserve better than? And more importantly, when are you going to throw that apron back in their face and walk out that door? Because trust me, the life waiting for you on the other side is so much bigger than the one they want to keep you in. You just have to be brave enough to claim it. If this story resonated with you, if you felt invisible in your own family or trapped by toxic loyalty, hit that like button right now. Subscribe so you don't miss more stories about breaking free and building better. And comment below telling me your thoughts. Have you ever had to walk away from family? Are you in a situation where you know you should but you're afraid? Let's talk about it in the comments, because nobody should feel alone in this fight. Remember, you're not asking for too much when you ask to be treated with basic respect. You're not being dramatic when you refuse to be diminished. You're not abandoning family when you refuse to be their victim. You're choosing yourself, and that's not selfish, that's survival. Now go throw your apron.